In part two of this conversation with Jennifer Kaufman, we're diving into a topic that doesn't get talked about enough, and that is public safety and the reality of emergency encounters involving autistic individuals. We're talking about first responders, police interactions, sensory overload, meltdowns versus non compliance, as well as the misunderstandings that can turn into serious and potentially life threatening situations when people don't understand how autism actually works. This episode is powered by Turning the Tide Tutoring, Acting with Pippi, Your Wish is Your Command, and Shared Humanity, a field agent's journey into the human mind. I'm your host, Nikki Hernandez, and you're listening to The Gentle Year. Hey everyone, welcome back to part two of the Gentle Years interview with Jennifer Kaufman. This time we are going to be talking about first responders, safety, public encounters, all of these different things that parents and grandparents, really everyone needs to know about when it comes to working with autistic individuals. So we're going to start with the very first question. Jennifer, why are autistic individuals at a higher risk during encounters with first responders?
That's a great question. And it's really because they often don't respond to social cues the way that officers and first responders expect them to. No eye contact can be read as evasive. Not following instructions as soon as they're read to them or asked of them can be interpreted as being resistant. And officers' training doesn't account for those neurological differences, so misinterpretation can happen really fast.
Wow, that's really interesting. Thank you for that, for explaining it, because you're right. The not looking, not making eye contact, not necessarily responding, all that can be very misinterpreted. And I actually had a individual on the show. Her name is Janine Tang, and she wasn't dealing with an autistic situation, but there was a case in her story where a social worker did misinterpret a situation. In what basically occurred, long story short, is that the mother's stoicism sent red flags to the social worker, and the social worker misinterpreted the mom's stoicism during a moment of crisis as being uncaring.
Oh.
And that wasn't what this was. And so I can definitely see how someone who's autistic, how someone could immediately see this person is a threat, this person is evasive, this person's non-responsive, or at least not responding to what we want. So in terms of dangers, what are some of the assumptions that a first responder might make or often makes that can become dangerous to the individual?
Well, there might be stimming that happens that an officer doesn't understand. There might be trying to elope, trying to leave. An officer is face to face with somebody and asks them to stay right here, and the person just wanders away. And it seems like it's defiance, but it's not defiance. It's because they're trying to cope during a stressful situation. There can be a lot of sensory overload during encounters with first responders. There can be, the lights on the car, the sirens, unfamiliar faces, commands that they're not familiar with. Are you familiar with the Blue Envelope program?
No.
So here in New Jersey, and I do understand that other states have it too, some of the towns have this Blue Envelope program. And it's an envelope that someone with autism can keep in their glove box, and you can keep your license, registration, insurance in there. One side of the envelope says, if you're pulled over by an officer, these are the things you should do. The other side of the envelope is for the police officer, saying this is an individual who has autism. He may not make eye contact. He may not communicate right away. Please provide more processing time, with suggestions as to how to support that person. And it's such a simple idea, such an inexpensive idea that can help both the person in the car and the person who might be interacting with them, the officer.
Yes. Is the assumption in this case that the autistic person is the driver or simply a passenger?
I'm going to assume that it's the driver because whenever I see this program discussed, it always involves having the license, registration, and insurance in the envelope.
Okay. I could see it being helpful for the passengers as well because if their parent or someone caretaker or whomever was driving them and there was an accident, God forbid, and that person
Hmm.
died,
Yeah,
then the
yeah,
autistic person would be in the car and they wouldn't know how to, on
yeah,
top of coping with all the stuff that's happening, they would need some way to be able to communicate with the officers for sure.
yeah.
Um, so you mentioned a word that I've heard you say before, but I still have not retained the meaning of it. Stimming?
Sure. Stimming is repetitive behavior that might offer some kind of sensory input to the person. It might be a tapping, it might be flapping of the hands, it might be um, picking at the skin. There can be different, that it might look like a habit or it might look like a nervous habit, but it's not. It's like a repetitious behavior that is often something that people with autism do.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yep.
And so this is going to help the first responders to understand that this person may have a response, a physical response to what is happening that may not necessarily seem normal. Is that
Right.
right?
Yeah, they may be covering their ears. They might be going, scripting is another term where they're repeating the same lines of text
Right.
over and over again. It might be a line from a TV show. So why,
Hmm.
you're being pulled over and you're repeating some kind of familiar um, jargon over and over again. And it might be unsettling for a police officer or might think that somebody's being a wise guy by doing that. And that's
Right.
not it at all.
So when your grandson Ben was sitting on the edge of this pier or
Hmm.
whatever it was, when he was sitting there, how did you guys approach him? Because you said I think the police were called,
Hmm.
different people were looking
Yeah.
for him. So how did you respond when you saw him?
It was a few years ago. I was not on the scene at the time. I was
Okay.
home. I had heard about it. And my understanding was that his dad was sort of like, hey, buddy, you know, um, and held his hand and walked back home. I think that was the extent of it.
Okay.
Just
Okay.
keeping things calm. I think keeping things calm is so important because in difficult situations, knee-jerk reactions and quick action without understanding the whole picture can result in tragic consequences.
Yeah, definitely. So besides the blue envelope program, are police officers and first responders, are they trained on these things?
It's interesting because I recently spoke with the police academy in my county, and it appears that there is some training. A lot of the training are, videos that they might watch and have to answer a couple of questions or like very rudimentary training versus having somebody come in and talk to them. And I've been speaking here and around the country at different police organizations, providing them with more direct training, and they seem to very much appreciate it. In fact, it's now grown to college campuses where I'm going onto college campuses and training their campus security teams as well. Because there are students on campus with autism and they have visitors to their campus with autism, and they're really at a loss as to how to best support
Yeah,
people.
absolutely. That's really interesting. Thank you for saying that because this is not just about first responders. This is all about college campuses. This is about living because we're all a community.
Right.
And this is not just information for first responders. This is information for all of us. And we can
And so,
take that to, yeah,
so
go
and
ahead.
I don't want to interrupt you, but
No, you're
it
fine.
just popped into my mind that a story that I heard from, I think he was in Ohio. It was a firefighter, and he had had a little bit of training to support people with autism. And he said to me, we're told that if we're in a smoky situation and we think that there's a child hiding under a bed, or in a closet and we're trying to find him, we will say, "Hey, buddy, give me a high five," even if they don't see the child. Because kids with autism are so conditioned to give high fives to people. Like they love giving high fives many times. I'm not going to say everybody, but it's a big thing. Like I high five the kids in my school all the time. So if a kid's hiding under the bed and they hear a firefighter say, "Hey, give me a high five," they could be compelled to come out from wherever they're hiding to give a high five.
Oh my goodness.
And it was just such a cool little story. And I thought, again, a very low cost, easy to remember strategy that could save a life.
Yeah, that gives me chills. It's something you would never think of in the moment because you're not thinking about giving somebody a high five during a fire, but remembering something like that could save a life, and
Yeah.
that's very profound. Okay. So, I've got a couple different questions here about the compliance aspect of things. I know that in certain situations, some people with autism can get very triggered. Do uniforms trigger, or do they typically make these individuals feel safer when they see the uniform?
Well, I think it goes back to the belief that if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. And a uniform might be triggering. If it's something unfamiliar, it might not. It really depends on the individual.
This episode of The Gentle Year is brought to you by Shared Humanity, a field agent's journey into the human mind by Dr. Robert Gillespie. Shared Humanity is a book that parents, teachers, and medical professionals the world over are using to develop the correct mindset and training protocols to interact with individuals living with mental and physical disabilities. Dr. Gillespie takes you directly into the therapeutic space where the things that we don't talk about, tension, pain, trauma, fear, survival, fractured relationships, all live in silence day in and day out. The journey into the human mind isn't just something to feel or analyze. This is to be lived through the pages of this book. And as our shared humanity shines through the treatment protocols that Dr. Gillespie uses to treat his patients at the deepest levels of despair, you will finally grasp what inner conflict looks like from a truly empathetic place. This will take your communication and leadership abilities to the next level. Current readers have described Shared Humanity as intense, emotionally layered, and impossible to forget. This is the type of book that you do have to ponder because the situations presented are simply too profound to move past, yet it keeps readers like yourself coming back for more. The link to order this magnificent book is in the show notes. Now, back to our interview with Jennifer Kaufman. So, in terms of de-escalation and communicating with these individuals, what is the difference between a meltdown and going into crisis mode for these individuals and non-compliance? And the reason why I ask is because I'm thinking, I won't go into the specific details of it, but I'm thinking of a specific situation in my head where an individual with autism was visibly upset, and the actions of that individual were very physical. And that's the extent of what I'll say on the show about that particular situation. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, was this individual being non-compliant? And do we interpret that behavior that they displayed as non-compliance and potential violence? Or is this simply a meltdown that this person cannot help to experience because they're in crisis mode? So what is the difference?
Well, I mean, I really think it's a situation by situation, very situational kind of thing. Because if somebody is non-compliant and they've got a weapon in their hand, or they're injuring themselves or somebody else, an officer might have to take action. Versus somebody who is being non-compliant, but non-compliancy looks like they're in the middle of the street walking in circles, or they're um, arguing, or I don't know, just being non-compliant without any kind of risk to body of their own body or somebody else's body. I think that determination has to be made. I know that police officers are trained to be proactive and to anticipate, what a situation can be and act based on what their belief is. Um, but I think that if you know that somebody has autism, factoring that into it and removing external stimuli so that the lights are off and that things are quieter and that there isn't a crowd around them staring at whatever's going down. Um, and giving that person sort of the grace to de-escalate themselves and help them get out of crisis mode, um, is something that should be considered in a situation.
For sure. Do you do these trainings because of Ben?
Yes, absolutely. I do it for every single student that I've ever had come through my doors. I do it for every single autistic person out there. I do it for every news story that I hear where a situation went bad. That I think, how could a little training have changed the outcome? I just
Hmm.
hope to change an outcome.
What do you train on specifically?
We talk about everything from myths and facts about autism to what's the difference between somebody who is inebriated or under the influence versus somebody who has autism. We talk about that. We talk about the signs to look for. We talk about processing time and giving somebody processing time when you think that they may be having a crisis and that they might be neurodiverse, because that processing time means everything. This came about because, like I mentioned to you, Seaside Heights, and I also mentioned a deck. And I have a deck that overlooks a very busy street. And occasionally we see lost children come off the beach, and we know they're lost because they're just sort of wandering up the boulevard with no shoes on. And like, that kid's lost. And then seeing police officers try to communicate with kids that are struggling to communicate, or trying to chase a child who is eloping, and then trying to figure out where does this child belong? We don't know who this child is. And then really thinking, if a police officer was giving a treat to a lost child, right? That's just such a normal thing to do. Well, children with autism have a lot of allergies, swallowing issues, different things that a simple snack to comfort them could really go bad. And then, my mind just kept wandering about all of the different components to what someone with autism brings to a situation, and how first responders, it's just so unfair that they don't have the training that they need to be able to identify the situations and then support that individual.
Is this work you do volunteer?
Um, Not necessarily, because there are just expenses involved, travel expenses, and yeah,
Totally understandable. Just wanted to make sure
yeah.
I knew.
It's actually a business of mine. Yep.
Good. Well, good for you. Now, most of us are not first responders. I don't want to make assumptions about everybody on the show. I'm sure that there's a first responder in the Facebook community. We're growing. We're almost at 200 members now, which is awesome. But I'm sure there's at least one first responder there. But most of us aren't that. Most of us are bystanders, and we are just watching a lot of these situations unfold, and we're not really knowledgeable about the distress that an autistic person may be feeling, especially in a very public situation. So what should people, who are laymen like me, what should we understand? What should we know?
Um,
And what should we expect? I know every situation is going to be different, but just give a kind of a general overview of about what we should expect is in these types of situations.
I think that's a great question. I think that people have to remember that it might look like somebody is tantruming. It might look like a 17-year-old having a tantrum, or a 5-year-old having a tantrum, and it's not. The person is in genuine crisis, and giving them space and a calm presence is more helpful than gathering in a crowd to watch, or filming it, or, gawking. and just giving that person the dignity to be able to go through their crisis situation without viewers.
Yeah. Yeah, I can definitely. I'm just processing a lot of things in my brain right now. I can see tons of situations where somebody is going to record, somebody's going to watch and gawk and do exactly what you said not to do. And that's unfortunate because it just kind of boils my blood a little bit when I even have that thought come to my head.
Mhm.
Um,
I'll share with you. We were in a restaurant having a lovely lunch. The five of us, my husband, myself, my daughter and her husband, and my grandson. And he was not happy to having it that day. He was upset about something, and he was vocalizing it, and he was in the middle of a behavior, and some older gentleman came over with his wife, and he just said something super nasty to my daughter, and went and sat down at their table and had lunch. And I was never so proud of my daughter, because at the end of the meal she got up and she went over to that gentleman and she said, "You have no idea what it took to even get my son into this restaurant, because he had a hard time with transitions." And she said to him, "You know, I wish you could show more compassion to situations that you know nothing about." And it was just, then I think she ended it with, "May you have the day that you deserve," or something along that line. But, I think that understanding by those who, not understanding, but just sort of, yeah, understanding and patience and compassion for those of us around us who are having a difficult time is what will make the world a better place, rather
yeah,
than judging about what you don't know.
yeah, yeah, definitely. If I had been at that table with y'all, let somebody come over
Oh,
to the table and say
grandma,
something.
grandma was ready to go off. But yeah, I
Yes,
know.
go off, Grandma. That's funny. I'm telling you, man. There's no way I could have held back. Only by the grace of God could I have done something like that. Let somebody say something to me like that.
I
Watch.
was so shocked. She waited to the end of the meal, and then she just walked right over and she said that to him. And
I think that's beautiful.
yeah, it was awesome.
She had and she taught him a lesson.
Hmm.
She taught him a valuable lesson. I'm sure I don't know if he was with his wife or whomever, but
Hmm.
I'm sure she was completely embarrassed and she probably had a few things to say to him later too.
I hope so.
I hope so too. Oh my goodness. Well, anyway, enough about that. But okay, so another question. For autistic people, obviously there's sensory issues and a lot of things can escalate. Things that escalate I don't want to say pain. I don't know. That's not the right word, but it can escalate situations that
Hmm.
we're not even aware of. I've heard things like fluorescent lighting. I've heard things like the texture maybe of like chalk on a chalkboard, that just the movement of something, all different kinds of things, or somebody chewing. That can, that actually affects a lot of people, not just people with autism. But I'm just kind of wondering what types of environments can unintentionally escalate a situation or cause distress for an autistic person, because you had mentioned that your daughter said that transitioning from one place to another was very, very difficult, and I'm assuming that some of those sensory issues may have had a part to play in that.
Yeah, it can be just about anything, honestly. But sounds, loud noises, even perfumes, unfamiliar scents might be a trigger. Um, Strangers, crowds. I know that Ben sometimes has a difficult time if there are a lot of people around. If there's a crowd, we're going into a show or a movie, it will cause some resistance. I think that identifying what it is, and if there's somebody with that person, you can always ask them. Like a first responder can really turn to the support person to say, how do I best communicate with him, or what keeps him calm, what can make him calm, can he have something to eat, you know. Um, it's really just looking at the situation and trying to identify what it is that might be escalating things.
Got it. Okay. Where can we learn more about your services and trainings on this?
Sure. My website is firstresponseautism.com.
Okay. Thank you. I'm just writing that down. Firstresponseautism.com.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. Now, for a crisis, what's the difference between someone who doesn't have autism and is in an emotional or mental crisis? It could be that they're suicidal, for example, versus someone who's autistic and in a crisis.
So, someone that is in a crisis that does not have autism may be able to communicate in a more productive way. They may be able to. Every situation is going to be different.
Sure.
They might be making eye contact where somebody with autism might not be making eye contact. That processing time that I discussed, somebody who does not have autism, even though they're in a crisis situation, they might, let's put it this way. You might say to somebody with autism, "What is your name?" And they don't answer the question. And then you ask them 3 more questions. And the 4th answer that you get is his name, because he's still on the first question because of processing time. You might not experience that with somebody who is in a crisis that does not have autism.
That makes sense.
Yeah. A lot of the strategies, such as processing time, can be applied to any situation. Just giving somebody that little bit of time because they're in a crisis, autism or not.
Yeah, that's very true. Okay, cool. So there was something, oh God, I forgot what it was. There was something I wanted to ask you. I might have to ask you on part 2, which is or part 3. So guys, we're going to go into part 3 of this interview with Jennifer. And what we're going to be discussing next is, I know what my question was, but I'll just give this anyway. So we're going to be discussing transitioning into adulthood for autistic individuals, because I know this is a really big topic, and I know people are very concerned, as you said yourself, Jennifer, that you're concerned that you're not going to be here one day, and he is, and how is he going to manage and navigate adulthood? So we're going to talk about that in part 3, but the last question that I had for you was about just shifting expectations for first responders. Obviously, you can't be in 100 places at once, and actually, no, I guess that's not even true, because the internet, you can be really anywhere, anywhere with people all over the world. But when it comes to shifting expectations, and in terms of how first responders approach neurodiverse individuals, what is one key takeaway that you want first responders specifically to know and understand about dealing with someone who has autism?
I think that understanding that every person with autism is different. They're unique, their likes, their dislikes, how they're needed to be supported. It's every person is different, and I know, like, they're out in the field and they're dealing with very dangerous crisis situations. But if you have a feeling that person is neurodiverse, is on the spectrum, give them that time to process, give them the calm environment, and ask them if they have a blue envelope.
Yes, going back to that. I love that. Well, thank you again, Jennifer, for being here for part 2 of this amazing interview. Outstanding work that you do, and we appreciate you so much. So, guys, if you're listening to the show, we're going to continue with Jennifer in the next segment about transitioning into adulthood. And again, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for being here for part 2 of this conversation with Jennifer Kaufman. I think one of the biggest takeaways for me from today's episode is that autism is not something that can be understood through assumptions, surface level observations, or quick judgments. Whether we're talking about first responders, schools, grandparents, public spaces, or everyday interactions, we need to understand that processing takes time, as there are a number of things going on at any given moment: sensory overload, communication differences, cultural differences, and emotional regulation. Knowing this can completely change the outcome of a situation. And Jennifer reminds us that sometimes the smallest shifts, a calmer tone, more patience, fewer assumptions, a little more awareness, can literally save lives. And honestly, that applies far beyond autism. It applies to how we treat people in general. If today's episode resonated with you, please consider sharing it with someone who needs to hear it: a parent, an educator, grandparent, therapist, police officer, firefighter, EMT, or anyone working with children and families. These conversations do matter. And before we go, I also want to thank the incredible sponsors who help make the Gentle Year possible. Shared Humanity, a field agent's journey into the human mind by Dr. Robert Gillespie, is a powerful exploration into the psychology of some of society's most emotionally and mentally complex individuals. Through the lens of a psychotherapist, the book takes readers directly into deeply human moments that challenge assumptions about behavior, trauma, emotional regulation, and what people are carrying beneath the surface. It's the kind of book people often need to pause while reading, not because it's difficult to get through, but because it's difficult to stop thinking about. If today's conversation impacted you, Shared Humanity is a deeply fitting companion piece to this episode. Turning the Tide Tutoring also provides personalized academic coaching for students who think differently, with a strong focus on writing, communication, critical thinking, and helping students build genuine confidence in themselves and their abilities. And Acting with Pippi, founded by the original Pippi Longstocking actress Tammy Aaron, she helps students build creativity, confidence, communication skills, and stage presence both on and off the screen. And before we officially close out today's episode, I want to transition into a short message about a resource that I've personally been exploring lately because it connects so strongly to growth, mindset, and the way we shape our lives from the inside out. If you've been listening to this podcast and feeling like you're in a season of growth, transition, or personal reinvention, I really encourage you to check out Your Wish is Your Command. I'm currently listening and reading it myself, and it's helping me create some major wins mentally, creatively, and professionally. It's a resource that really challenges the way that you think about possibility, mindset, and the direction of your life. You can find links to everything we mentioned today in the show notes, and thank you again for listening to The Gentle Year. Stay tuned for more information on Your Wish is Your Command, and I'll see you in part 3.
It's a success system that can't fail. It's been called the success system that never fails.
After getting Your Wish is Your Command, I went from 5K on my bank account to 8 million in 1.5 years.
90% of the people that read The Secret and tried to use the law of attraction or any of the training that's available from any of the other success gurus, they try to apply it, but for some reason they don't get the results they want. And that's why they say the law of attraction is a scam. It's not really a scam because the mind does create what you want, but there's missing ingredients to the recipe. And when they don't apply and use those missing ingredients, they're not going to get the results they want. I learned it properly, and that's how I created billions of dollars in sale. And now I teach this to others, and everyone who's using it is getting spectacular results.
Your Wish is Your Command is really what started it all. At the time, I didn't even have a job. Today, I make about $250,000.
I bought a Porsche. I manifested a Rolex.
I manifested the home of my dreams.
I got a hold of Your Wish is Your Command, and after I finished it, my life changed. My income doubled.